My name is Mara Keller. I'm 35 years old. And 3 months ago, my mother slid a folder across a linen-covered table in a downtown Austin restaurant and handed the company I built over 12 years to my sister like it was a birthday gift. She smiled as if she were doing me a favor and said, "We've decided Rachel will take over from here. It makes sense. She has kids. She needs stability." My father didn't even hesitate. He leaned in, looked at me with that calm, condescending tone, and added, "You'll work under her. She deserves it more. She has kids." I remember my fork hitting the plate too hard. The couple at the next table glancing over. My sister's lips tightening to hide her smirk. And something in me going perfectly still. I didn't cry. Didn't argue. Didn't ask for the papers. I just said, "If that's how you want it, then you can run it without me," and pushed my chair back while their smiles flickered. My mother whispered, "Mara, don't be dramatic." But I had already stood up. My father's voice followed, trying to sound reasonable. "It's family. You'll understand one day." I laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because something irreversible had just snapped. And they didn't even hear it. When I walked out of that restaurant, I left behind 12 years of sleepless nights, client calls, and payrolls balanced by willpower. The air outside felt too quiet, like the world was waiting for my reaction. I didn't give it one. I just kept walking, my phone buzzing with messages I refused to read. They thought they'd close the deal of their lives. But what they didn't know was that inside the system they'd just hijacked. I'd left a note, a silent reminder, set to activate the moment they crossed a legal line. And it was already counting down. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside Denver. The kind of neighborhood where the grass stayed too green and everyone waved without meaning it. My mother, Evelyn, worked at a bank and liked to say she understood how stability was built. My father, Thomas, was an engineer who believed silence solved most problems. Rachel, my older sister, was always the example honor roll. Scholarships. The kind of daughter who made my mother glow in public. When I forgot my lunch, Mom said, "You'll survive." When Rachel forgot hers, Mom drove across town to deliver it with a note that said, "Don't skip meals, sweetheart." My father shrugged and said, "You know how your mom is with your sister." I used to tell myself it was normal, that every family had favorites. But even then I knew which child was expected to figure things out alone. That label independent was just another word for disposable. By the time I finished college, I had learned that approval wasn't coming. No matter how hard I worked, I started Aurora Media with a used laptop and a stack of cheap flyers, designing marketing campaigns for coffee shops that couldn't afford agencies. When I tried to open a business account, the bank manager smiled too politely and said, "You're too new." Mom leaned in that night, her tone patient, almost rehearsed. "Let me help you," she said. "I know how these things work." 2. She explained that if she registered the LLC under her name, we could get better credit and lower fees. "It's just paperwork. Honey, you'll still be the one running everything." I signed the forms at her kitchen table, thinking it was a gesture of trust, not a transfer of power. My father called it teamwork. Rachel called it cute. And Mom called it smart business. I called it partnership until I learned what signatures really mean. Even then, she'd remind me, "Good thing my name's on the documents. Banks love that." I'd smile and say, "Sure, Mom," pretending it didn't sting. Every success I earned was credited to her foresight. Every setback to my inexperience. That pattern didn't break as the company grew. It just became more polished, more invisible. What began as family support was already turning into silent ownership. and I was too busy proving myself to see it. Aurora Media grew faster than I ever imagined. From a corner desk in my apartment to a glass office overlooking downtown Denver, the year we crossed 4,800,000 inches revenue. My mother said, "Good thing my name's on the paperwork. Banks love that." I laughed like it was a joke, though the words left a bruise I couldn't quite locate. Rachel sent a text that night. "Proud of you. Sis. Must be nice not worrying about daycare bills," and added a smiley that felt like a knife. Clients came from across the country, and the team I built worked late because they believed in what we were creating. But every success meeting started the same way, Mom asking, "Did you file that under my tax ID?" Followed by her small, satisfied nod when I said yes. One evening I told her, "We should start transitioning the ownership." She didn't look up from her laptop. "No rush. My credit keeps everything stable." The word stable hung in the air like a quiet warning. Rachel visited during one of our launch events, walking through the office in heels that clicked like punctuation. She said, "You've built something impressive, but you need structure. Maybe I could help streamline things." I smiled, keeping my voice light. "You mean run them?" She smirked. "You're the creative one. I'm the organized one. We both know Mom trusts me with details." I told her, "This isn't about trust." She leaned closer. "Everything is about trust." Not long after that, I found a memo in Mom's email Vincent read. The man she'd just started seeing had proposed leveraging Aurora as collateral for a real estate venture. When I asked her, she brushed it off. "Just exploratory talk." "Sweetheart, don't overthink it," I said. "You can't pledge what you don't own." She smiled too calmly. "On paper." "I do." That was the moment suspicion replaced pride. When the company I built started to feel like a house with someone else's name on the deed, I began backing up every file, every contract. Not because I planned to run, but because I finally understood I might have to. The dinner was supposed to be a family celebration. A quiet meal before Mom and Vincent left for Phoenix. We sat around the table, wine glasses catching the light while Rachel scrolled through her phone until Mom said, "Let's focus. Everyone, we've been doing some estate planning." She opened a folder with neatly tabbed pages and smiled. "We've decided Rachel will take over Aurora. She has the MBA, the management background, and 3 kids to think about." I looked from her to the folder, then to Rachel, who set her phone down like a queen accepting her crown. I said, "I'm sorry. Take over what?" Rachel's smile didn't reach her eyes. "It's just succession. Mata, you'll still have a role." Of course. Mom thought I could handle the big picture direction. My father leaned forward, his tone calm and final. "You'll work under her. It's logical. She has a family to support." I stared at him, and my voice came out low. "So the woman who built it now takes orders from the woman who never showed up?" He sighed. "Don't make this emotional. Mata, it's business." "Too hogris," Mom added softly. "You'll thank us later. This will give you balance. Less pressure. You've worked so hard for so long." I said, "Don't call it balance when you mean control." Rachel reached for her glass, trying to sound gracious. "You always said you didn't care about titles." I answered, "I care about ownership." She laughed under her breath. "You're overreacting." I looked straight at her. "No. I'm finally reacting. 1-2. The silence that followed felt heavier than the wine in my glass. My father murmured, "Let's not turn this into a scene." I said, "You turned it into a scene when you handed my life's work across the table." Mom's voice cracked slightly. "Please, don't ruin this night." I stood, pushing my chair back. You already did, my sister muttered. Always dramatic. As I reached for my coat, I paused long enough to meet her eyes. You'll learn soon enough what drama really looks like when the foundation you stole starts to crack. Then I walked out, leaving the dessert untouched and the folder still open like an unburied secret. The next morning, I walked into the office as if nothing had happened. My team greeted me with the same warmth they always did, unaware that the company they worked for had just been handed to someone else. I watched Rachel in the conference room pretending to understand numbers she'd never seen before, her laughter echoing like static. By noon, I sent my resignation email short, polite, final, and attached every document they would need to transition without me. I didn't explain, didn't accuse, didn't ask for a meeting. I just wrote, effective immediately. I'm stepping down. Mom replied within minutes. We can talk about this. And Dad added, don't make this harder than it has to be. I stared at their words until the screen blurred, then closed the laptop and whispered to myself, you already did. That night, I registered a new name, Northlight Studio, and hired a lawyer to ensure every line of ownership pointed only to me. When I told my closest teammates, they didn't hesitate. We're in, they said. We don't care about the name. We care about you. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Then let's build something that can't be stolen again. We moved into a small shared office with secondhand desks and a coffee machine that hissed louder than it brewed. There were no glass walls, no board meetings, no family oversight, just work and freedom. The first few days felt strange, like learning to breathe without permission. I set up our systems, signed new contracts, and let the silence remind me that I was finally alone on my own terms. When people asked what happened with Aurora, I said, it's complicated. But what I meant was simple. They took the structure. I kept the soul. 2 months after walking away, I was invited to speak at an online summit about burnout and boundaries. I hesitated before saying yes, then decided I had nothing left to lose. On camera, I told the story without names or drama, just facts. I built a company I didn't own. I said, I learned that loyalty without clarity is a contract signed in silence. After the session, the organizer messaged me. That was raw. She wrote, people need to hear this. Within days, someone clipped my talk and uploaded it with the title. She built a multi-million company she didn't own. The comments flooded in founders, freelancers, women who said they'd lived versions of my story. One wrote, this is why we read every line before signing anything. Another said, she didn't lose. She evolved. Distanded. The clip spread across LinkedIn, YouTube, and business forums like wildfire. A week later, a clean energy startup reached out. We watched your talk, their CMO said. Anyone who survived that and still believes in building deserves a chance to lead ours. I closed my laptop and whispered, that's how rebirth sounds. 2 theirs on. For the first time, my success wasn't tied to someone else's approval or paperwork. It came from telling the truth out loud and letting the world see what silence had tried to bury. I didn't burn bridges, they simply collapsed behind me. And all I had to do was keep walking forward. 3 months after that dinner, my phone lit up with my mother's name in the middle of a workday. Her voice was tight, brittle around the edges. Mara, we need to talk. Can you meet us? I asked. Who's us? And she said, your father, Rachel, and me. Please. It's important. I almost laughed at the irony of that word important, but curiosity won. We met at a cafe near the Denver Tech Center, one of those places where people pretend to work while avoiding real confrontation. They were already seated when I walked in, each of them looking smaller, quieter. Older. Rachel spoke first. Her tone clipped. You've put us in a really difficult position. Clients are leaving to go with you. Staff too. It's not fair. I looked at her and said, they're adults. They chose where to go. I didn't force anyone. Actually, Mom cut in quickly, smoothing her voice like she could iron the tension out of the air. Regardless of how we got here, the truth is, Aurora is struggling. The bank is tightening the terms on the loan. We need you back. Mara, you know the clients. The team. If you come back as COO under Rachel, we can fix this for the family. Dad nodded, adding, sometimes you have to put aside your pride for the greater good. Your sister has a family to support. You're still young. You'll be fine. I leaned back and said, so the solution is I rebuild what you broke while working under the person who helped destroy it? Rachel snapped. Don't be dramatic. This isn't about blame. It's about survival. I said, you mean yours? She glared. If you really cared about the company, you'd do the right thing. I answered. I did. I left before it drowned me. Dad muttered. We're offering you a way back. I said. You're offering me a sinking ship and calling it family. Ah. Mom's voice cracked as she whispered. Please. Mara, we're out of time. The bank could seize everything. I looked at her, then asked, how much debt? Rachel hesitated. And I pressed again. How much? She finally said. 2.6 million. I exhaled slowly. Then it's already gone. I stood up, dropped enough cash on the table for my coffee, and looked at them one last time. You made a business decision. I said, now live with it. Then I walked out, leaving them in a silence they couldn't refinance. Aurora didn't just falter, it imploded. Within 6 months, the bank froze their accounts. The lease was terminated, and what was left of the staff scattered to competitors. I heard through an old colleague that the agency had been sold to a larger firm for barely enough to cover the outstanding loan. When Vincent's development deal collapsed, he disappeared, leaving Mom with the wreckage he'd built on borrowed money. Rachel lost the house she'd bragged about, traded her luxury SUV for a used sedan, and posted motivational quotes about starting over like she hadn't caused the fire herself. Dad picked up consulting work again, his pride swallowed along with his retirement plans. When someone asked if I'd heard about the sale, I said only, that's how justice handles itself. It wasn't triumph, it was inevitability. Mom moved back to Denver into a small apartment not far from where I once rented mine. She called once, her voice trembling. I didn't think it would end like this, she said. I answered quietly. It ended the moment you called theft family. After that, she stopped trying to justify it. I didn't need to watch their downfall. It played out exactly the way greed always does, loud at first, then suddenly silent. I ran into Mom at a grocery store one afternoon, both of us reaching for the same bag of apples. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she said softly, you look well. I nodded. I am. Her eyes glistened before she whispered, I'm sorry. Mara. I was trying to protect what I thought mattered. I answered. You were protecting ownership, not family. She looked down, then said, I lost both anyway. We stood there in that small aisle, the hum of refrigerators filling the silence. I didn't feel anger anymore, just the quiet recognition that forgiveness doesn't mean return. She asked, do you think we'll ever be close again? I said, I think we're finally honest. And that's something. It wasn't closure wrapped in warmth, but it was real. A week later, I left an old laptop on her doorstep with a note taped to it. Thank you for the beginning. I'll handle the rest. I didn't wait for a reply. As I walked back to my car, I realized peace isn't loud or cinematic. It's the absence of needing to be understood. Justice had already spoken. Now it was time to live without keeping score. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you've ever been asked to choose between keeping peace and keeping yourself, I hope you remember this. Silence isn't loyalty, and walking away isn't weakness. Subscribe for more stories about strength, justice, and the quiet kind of freedom that lasts.